Joining us right now, former Democratic presidential candidate, former Ohio Congressman and Fox News contributor Dennis Kucinich. Also joining us is former Illinois Congressman Joe Walsh. Congressman, good to see you both. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good to see you.
And Congressman Kucinich, let me kick it off with you. How do you think these negotiations will move along? We know that trade is a priority this week.
This is a big development because, I've been saying for years that NAFTA ought to be repealed. And now what President Trump is doing is taking the steps. And who's he meeting with? Not just the companies, but the workers, the union leaders. When those trade agreements were fashioned, those groups were absolutely left out of the picture. We need to change the trade agreements, bring jobs back here. That's the direction he's going in, and I think it's a good thing for America. It's not, these plants aren't going to appear magically back in America, but that he's taking the steps. He's moving in the right direction.
Yeah, so Congressman Walsh, what do you want to see? This is the one sticking point that there's a fair amount of debate about when debating and scrutinizing President Trump's economic plans, that is trade. So what would be least disruptive but also most positive for American workers?
Well, hey, Maria, Trump's instincts here, as Dennis said, are great. Jobs, jobs, jobs. I think his presidency will be defined by whether he can put Americans back to work. My hope, though, is that this is much more carrot than stick. I'm fine, and I agree with my former colleague, Congressman Kucinich, that we ought to take another look at NAFTA. But when you talk about things like withdrawing from NAFTA or some sort of big old tariff, that's going to hurt American jobs, and that's going to hurt American consumers.
Yeah.
Again, my hope is that Trump understands that we want to make it more attractive for companies to stay here, but a tariff is good for nobody.
Right. John Hilsner, that's the sticking point, right? I mean, how do you get to economic growth, move the needle on economic growth through trade?
Well, and as Congressman Kucinich said, one of the big questions is, are the jobs actually going to come back? I mean, these are still very low-cost countries, Mexico, China, a lot of other U.S. trade partners. If we renegotiate these deals, is that going to be enough to bring jobs back into the United States?
Yeah.
I'm not so sure.
You don't think so? And who just said you can't when I said, how do you move the needle on economic growth through trade? You said you can't?
I did.
Go ahead. Why?
That was Walsh. Yeah,
Why, Walsh?
I did, Maria, because again, if you are going to tariff and add extra taxes on companies, that's going to hurt economic growth. That'll hurt jobs here, and that'll hurt American consumers. We want to make it more attractive for companies to stay, not hammer them with a tariff.
Maria, I'd like to add this,
yeah.
And I appreciate the insight of my former colleague, Mr. Walsh. I want to say that there's a linkage here between this debate and the Affordable Care Act, and here it is. The high cost of health insurance adds about $1,400 per car to the cost of an automobile in this country. If we're able to move to a new health care model like Medicare for All, we can help business, reduce the cost, and improve the economy. So there are linkages with health insurance costs to these trade policies.
Mr. Kucinich, this is Kirsten Haglund here. When we're talking about economic growth, which is obviously what we all want, versus jobs, right? So President Trump now has said he wants to create 25 million jobs. That would be the most of any president in the modern era. But how do you do that with the reality that is automation, right? Because we can't just renegotiate trade deals to help get these jobs back, because it's not just about bringing them back from overseas. It's also about the fact that many of these jobs are being replaced by robots. So, yeah, we're looking forward to economic growth, but how does that couple with jobs and the realities of the new economy?
Well, I think the principal way the president will be able to create millions of jobs is to rebuild America's infrastructure. That's what he talked about in his inaugural. And you can put millions of people back to work, rebuilding America's bridges, water systems, sewer systems. We can have an America that will be prime for an investment that will cause businesses to be attracted here because you have a newer infrastructure. So, I think that's one way he's going to do it. You're certainly right that just by changing the trade agreements is not going to create millions of jobs. But if we can recover our automotive, steel, aerospace, shipping industries, wow, we're on our way.
Yeah, and then there's taxes. Yesterday, Grover Norquist joined me on Fox News, and he said, let's not forget the first and most important tax cut of all, and that is repealing and replacing Obamacare.